Now here we're going to look at how we can add matrices together and also subtract matrices. Before we look at that, I want to look at though what's going to make two matrices equal to each other. For example, if I was to give you the following negative 5, x, y, and 8, and if this is going to be equal to another matrix such as negative 5, 13, 12, and 8. If these two matrices are going to be equal, then that means that the corresponding entries have to be equal. For example, row 1, column 1, here we have a negative 5, so that has to be equal to row 1, column 1 over here, which is also a negative 5. So if these two matrices are equal to each other, then that tells us that here the value of x must be equal to 13. So here we could conclude that x is equal to 13, and then y would have to be equal to 12, and then of course here 8 is equal to 8. So in order for our matrices to be equal, they have to equal the corresponding entries. Let's look at another example, and let's see if we can solve for x and y here. If we have x plus 2, 8, and negative 3, 1, 2y, 2x, 7, negative 2, and y plus 2. If this matrix is equal to this one, which is 2x plus 6, 8, negative 3, 1, 18, negative 8, 7, negative 2, and 11. So here we want to solve for x. Well, we see that here, this first entry, we have x plus 2. Well, that's going to have to be equal to 2x plus 6. So if we solve, we could take x plus 2 and set that equal to 2x plus 6. So I could subtract x from both sides, and we would get 2 is equal to x plus 6. And then if I subtract 6, then we would end up with 2 minus 6, which is a negative 4. Okay, and then we can look here, we can also look at this as well. Notice here we have a 2x, then that means that has to be equal to a negative 8. Well, of course, 2x equals negative 8. We don't have to do this because we already know the value of x is negative 4, but we can prove this as well. Negative 8 divided by 2 equals negative 4. So either one of those you could solve for x. And now if we want to solve for y, here we have 2y, that must be equal to 18. So we would take 2y equals 18, and we simply divide by 2, so therefore y is equal to 9. And if we want to verify that, we can always look at the last one here. Y plus 2 has to be equal to 11. And of course, we're going to subtract 2, so again, y is still equal to 9. So really, you only have to solve one of those for x and one of these equations for y. So again, if the matrices are equal, each corresponding entry must be equal. All right, so we want to now look at how do we add two matrices together. Well, first of all, one thing that's very important is that if you're going to add your matrices together, they must have the same order. Okay, so in other words, you can only add a 2 by 3 matrix with a 2 by 3, or a 2 by 2 to a 2 by 2, or a 3 by 3 by 3 by 3. So for example, if we were given this 2 by 2 matrix, which is negative 1, 2, 0, 1, and we want to add this to 1, 3, negative 1, 2, notice here we have each one is a 2 by 2 matrix, and if we're going to add these together, you're just simply going to add the corresponding entries. That's why they have to be the same order. So here we would take -1 and 1, which would be 0. 2 plus 3 is 5. 0 and -1 is -1. And 1 plus 2 is 3. So here we end up with 0, 5, -1, 3 as our answer. So once again here, they have to have the same order. So if we look at the next example, let's say that we have 7, 3, 0, 5, and we're going to add this to 1, -7, 5, 0, 4, 9, -8, 3, and 2. So how do we add these together? Well, if we look, this first one is a 2 by 2 matrix, and then over here we have a 3 by 3. So there's no way we can add these together because they do not have the same order. For example, if we try to add these together, you would add 7 and 1, and then you would add 3 and -7, but then there would be nothing to add to the 5. So therefore, we cannot add these together. So this addition would be undefined. So in other words, it is not possible to add these two matrices because they do not match up. The order is not the same. And then the same thing is going to be true for subtraction, except for you're simply going to subtract instead of add. So again, your order has to be the same. So if we have 4, -3, let's say 10, 7, and we're going to subtract away 6, 1, 2, 7, then once again you're going to subtract the corresponding. Again, here we have a 2 by 2 matrix, and over here we have a 2 by 2 matrix. So we would take 4 minus 6, and if you take 4 minus 6, that's going to give us a -2. -3 minus 1. Okay, -3 minus 1 is -4. And then we'd have 10 minus 2, which is 8. And 7 minus 7 would be 0. So your answer is -2, -4, 8, and 0. So when it comes to adding and subtracting, you simply add and subtract the corresponding entries to your matrix.